Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Lily and Ladybug, and I'm going to be sipping on a little white wine spritzer today. And if you do enjoy this video, I encourage you to like and subscribe, and you can also check out my Patreon page where you'll find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'm going to be using. I'll be using acrylic paint today. The colors are titanium white, burnt umber, which I'll call brown. This is violet purple, green oxide, deep yellow, fire red, Mars black, and cobalt blue. And of course you can switch up those colors if you'd like, but that's what I'm going to be using. For my tools today, I have 3 paint brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush. I have a number 12 round brush, and I have a number 2 round brush, and I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. And again, you could certainly switch those up if you'd like. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And I do have a couple of additional resources for you that you can find down below in the video description. What you're going to find there is you're going to find a link where you could purchase the same paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to the brushes and the palette and the paint and all that good stuff. So that's there for you. What also is there for you is a link where you can download a free image of the final painting, so you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're painting the background, the entire canvas. We're going to be using this large bristle brush, and the colors that I'm going to be using are white, brown, blue, and purple. And how I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to be using these colors in an arbitrary fashion. I'm going to kind of alternate the colors, and I can have multiple colors on my brush at the same time. I'm looking for, and I'm applying it in a circular fashion. For me, I'm looking for this to be almost like a abstract type background with complementary colors to the actual flower itself. So you could certainly envision your background to be the sky or a wall or abstract. Whatever you'd like it to be is totally fine with me. This is your painting. You can, again, take it into whatever kind of realm that you want. If you want there to be some deep purples back there, feel free to use more purple. If you want it to be nice and dark, to have that flowers really pop out, you can use the darker tones and less white. What I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be doing 2 coats on this. So this first coat's going to be really kind of scratchy looking and messy and not beautiful, so to speak. But by the time I get done my second layer on it, it will have taken on a really nice, soft, almost out of focus kind of look to it. You could certainly do a different brush stroke. Maybe you do yours in a crisscross manner, or maybe you go left to right throughout the whole canvas. Whatever brush stroke you are feeling comfortable with using, you can certainly use that. Just be consistent with that brush stroke throughout the entire canvas. So if you start with circles, you want to finish with circles. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm overlapping my color sections. I'm really just kind of alternating, picking up, you know, this time I just picked up brown with whatever were the remnants on my brush. I'm not washing my brush. So that way these colors just kind of meld together and they really work well together. They're almost complementing one another as they're touching each other. So feel free to, again, make it as vibrant as you want, as dark as you want, as blue as you want, as purple as you want. It's really totally up to you. Once I've got it pretty well set on here, before I do my second layer, what I'm going to do, I see that I have a bunch of kind of naked spots. So what I'm going to do with my brush is I'm going to be while it's still drying, I just take my brush and continue with that motion on top of the previous areas that I did with a very light pressure. So I'm not pushing really hard. I'm just using the teeny tiny tip of my brush. And what's happening is, because I'm not using a lot of pressure, I'm able to kind of control how I'm blending these with one another. And I don't need a perfect blend at this point, but what I am really looking for is complete coverage over the canvas. So as I do this, I'm looking for some bald spots on my canvas, and I'm just going to continue until I have the entire canvas covered. And then we are going to be using the same brush for the next step. So once you get the first layer of this background done, you can wash and dry this large brush. Get ready for the next step. Okay, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the second layer of the background. So I'm going to be using the same colors that I used the first time. I'm going to be using the same brush. So the colors that I used for the first layer are white, blue, purple, and brown. And again, my large bristle brush. I do want to forewarn you before you actually attempt this second layer that you want to make sure your painting is dry first. So, you know, you can either take an extra long break if you need to, or you could blow on it, or you could just take a blow dryer and just blow dry it. So whatever you need to do, make sure that it's dry, because when you do back-to-back layering like this, if that first layer is not dry, you run the risk of pulling your paint right off of the canvas and you'll get these bald spots. So if that does happen as you're going about it, just let off on your pressure, stop painting that one section, let it dry, and then go back on top of it and you can do a second layer. So my main goal for the second layer is just to make this softer looking. So I'm going to be using the same colors, the same brush stroke. I probably am not going to be using as high of a quantity of paint on my brush as I go to apply it. And when I'm applying it, I'm not going to be pushing hard. I'm really just going to be using the tip of my brush and just lightly doing a layer on top of it. And you don't have to just put purple where you see purple and blue where you see blue. You can certainly switch up the colors and have brown on top of purple or purple on top of blue. You'll see as you go through this process that it's going to be okay if you have a different color on top of the first color. So I just loaded my brush with blue, brown, white, just a little bit of each. And you can certainly, again, bend and twist this color to whatever you want it to be. But you're going to really see right off the bat, this second layer is going to look so much softer than that first layer did. So just know that, you know, whatever happened on that first layer is providing you with a beautiful base for this second softer layer on top of it. And you might want yours lighter, you might want it darker. Again, I'm not using a ton of paint and I will go a little bit slower, so I almost complete one area before I go on to the next area. I might have areas go a little bit darker or a little bit lighter or a little bit more purple. Whatever kind of comes off of my brush, I'm just gonna go with, because I think this is just gonna be a beautiful, nice, soft, abstract type background. And you can really see the difference from one area to the next. And again, I just am alternating my colors. That time I just picked up some white and brown. Right now I'm going to pick up maybe white and a little bit of purple, and again, as light or as dark as you want, maybe a little bit of brown at this point, just to kind of neutralize this upper corner a little bit, and have fun with whatever color combination you want. You might go about this and really start digging that brown and purple together and thinking that it just makes a beautiful combination. So roll with it. Whatever is visually appealing to you. We're not trying to get this to look like a photograph here. We're just trying to give our beautiful lily that we're going to be painting later a nice background to complement it behind it. So don't feel the pressure to make this look like anything specific. Just go for, you know, maybe you want it to look good in a specific room of your house. So maybe you want it to be more on the bluer side. You know, whatever is in your thought process will totally work for this. And again, you can see that I'm just kind of cruising along, making sure I almost overlap back into that previous section to make sure that they talk well together. And again, if you're not having tremendous success with your blending, maybe you need a little bit more paint on your brush so that way it stays wet for a second longer. Some people do like to use a touch of water in their paint. I don't necessarily recommend that unless you are comfortable with using water. And the reason I tell you that is because we are working on a second layer. And again, that second layer is the layer underneath it is so new and it's kind of fragile, and this is water-based paint. So if you start adding water to that canvas, it can help to thin out your paint and provide some type of benefit when you're blending, but with that layer underneath, what you might find happen is you're gonna activate the paint, and it'll again just kind of pull right off of your canvas. So if you have used a little bit of water, or there's water on your brush and that has happened to you, again, just kind of back off from that area, and then you can just come back to it after it has dried. But you can see mine's really nice and soft and pretty and subtle. So I'm just rolling with this. I'm digging these colors together. The purple and the brown are really tickling my fancy. I like how they are adding some warmth to it. And when you put it on top of another color, like I can see little peekaboo spots of the blue underneath it. So just roll with it. And I am almost done with this step. So when you do get done with this step, we are going to be using our, let's see, what are we going to use for the next step? Our medium brush. So you can get this whole layer nice and done. You can keep fiddling with it as much as you want. Make it as soft and as pretty as you want it to be. And then we will switch brushes for the next step. Just getting this little last corner on here. I'm digging this. It's gonna look beautiful with this big, huge white lily in the middle of it. All right, so I'm gonna put this brush away, take out my medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we are doing the first layer of our stem and our leaves. So I'm gonna be using my medium brush, and I'm gonna be using green and brown paint. And just think of this as like a base coat for the stem and the leaves. So again, it's not going to look totally awesome after this step, but I do want to again forewarn you, just have your canvas dry before you go on to this step. That way you don't run the risk of pulling up any paint. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to load my brush with green and brown at the same time. It doesn't matter if you have more of one or less of the other. And then what I'm going to do, this type of flower that we're doing, these stems are almost jointed. They have these little, almost like, I don't want to call them knuckles, but like little joint type areas where the flower part comes out of. So that's how I'm going to make my stems. So I'm going to come on the bottom left, and I'm going to come in maybe 3 or 4 inches, and then I'm going to do a vertical line that's slightly tipped to the left-hand side. So maybe something like this, and it's maybe about 1/4 of an inch wide, 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch wide. And then I'm going to do another one coming up towards the left-hand side at a little bit more of an angle, and maybe it has a little bit of a curve to it. And it could be a little bit wider, this one, this next, the top part. And I think what I'm going to do at the top is I'm going to make it into a little bit of a wider area. That's where my flower bud or bulb is gonna come out of. So that's gonna be that. Now I'm gonna put a couple of leaves on it. So I'm gonna put maybe, I hear one of my dogs is starting to act up. So if you start hearing a big, you know, barking kind of noise, sorry about that. It's a little dog, but it makes some big barking noises. So right now I'm going to just make this leaf, maybe this one's coming out the other side. And again, I'm just using green and brown on my brush right now. And this one's just gonna kind of come pointy down like that. There they go. But there must be a mailman or something coming down my driveway. I'm gonna have a little leaf over on this side. Maybe it's leaning over the other edge of this particular stem. So something like that. Then I'm gonna have a big, huge one kind of coming out over in this direction. Maybe this one comes way down into that corner kind of place. Maybe this one is a little bit more wiggly and bendy and has a little bit more character to it. And then maybe I'll put a couple of small ones down at the bottom. Maybe I've got one, I don't know, somewhere in here. And then maybe I've got a little one kind of creeping over in through that direction. And then we're gonna use the same brush for the next step. So once you have your first layer of your leaves and your stem, you can wash and dry the same brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we are doing the base coat for the petals on our flower. I'm gonna be using my medium brush, and the colors that I'm using are white, brown, and black. And what I'm gonna do first is I'm going to pre-mix myself a warm gray. That's gonna be the base color that I use for the petals. So how I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna take some white, add a little bit of brown, actually quite a bit of brown, and a touch of black. I want it to be more on the warm side, as this is going to just be the base coat for these really seemingly bright white petals. So I don't want to turn it too cold by putting a cool gray, which would be black and white. So I'm turning mine more into like a creamy brownish gray, and this will help us when we need to add dimension to the petals. So if you start with white and just use white as your base coat, some wise person once said, I don't know if I read it or they told me, I don't even know who it was, said, you can't see the light without the dark. So if you just started with white petals, it's going to be very difficult to get dimension on them. So I start with a darker base and then I add my highlights to it that way.
Without darkness, there's no light. Without day, there is no night.
So how I'm gonna do this is I'm first gonna do what I'm gonna call the front petal, and everything else is gonna be built off of that. So this type of flower that we're doing, it is I think it's called a Madonna Lily. Madonna white lily, I think is the correct name for it. It's just this big, huge, vibrant white lily, and I think it has 6 petals. So I want one to be kind of flopping over. I want to be able to see the inside of the flower, and I also want you to see, it's almost like a bell type shape as it's opening, so I want you to see the bottom of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in seemingly the same direction as my stem is, and I'm going to come maybe about 2 or so inches away from there, and I'm going to make myself a little bit of a mark. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come directly below this mark and a little bit over to the right. I'm going to stop maybe about 1.5 inches away from the bottom of my canvas. That's going to be the tip of this particular leaf that we're doing. It's going to be really big. It's going to be in through here. And then what I want to do is I want to do the edge that's folding into the inside of the flower. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to almost just do a little like that and a little like that. And now I want my petal to come over here and meet down in through here. So really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go over to the left a little bit and then curve it and meet it somewhere over in this little point here. And then on this side I'm going to do a little bit of a loop in through here. Maybe not a loop, but kind of a curved line like that. And then bring this down in through here. So this is in essence going to show that the petal is tipped over. It's coming out of here and it's tipped over. And we're going to add highlights and shadow that are going to make it look way more realistic than it looks right now. But right now we're just kind of adding that base coat to it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to build everything off of this leaf. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to build the leaf to the right of it. So this leaf is going to come kind of out this corner right in through here. And I don't want to get my petals confused with one another. So you'll see I probably am going to always leave a little bit of a space between them so I don't get lost within my petals. So I'm bringing this over here. Oh, let me tell you where to go. So you're going to come kind of straight up from here, maybe about 3 inches. Maybe a touch to the left a little bit. That's going to be the point of it, the edge of it. So I'm going to bring this up something like this, somewhere around there. And then this is curved over like this. So it needs to come back into the center of the flower. So the inside of it doesn't need to go much farther than this. I'm going to bring it over in through this direction, maybe up a little bit, and then just kind of come streaming down something like this. And then I'm just going to color it in. You don't need to color it in any tricky kind of brush strokes. Now that I've got these two on here, I can put that little bell thing underneath. So I'm going to start somewhere about here. And this is going to be where the flower grows from. So bring it right down to your stem, and then it can kind of come out and meet somewhere in through here. And again, you don't want to get yourself confused, so just leave a teeny tiny bit of space in between those. We'll get rid of that space later, but this is, again, just to kind of give you a roadmap and a guideline where you want all of these pieces of this beautiful flower. So now what I'm going to do, I have 5 more to go. So I know everything needs to come out of this center. So I think the next one I'm going to do is this one over on the left-hand side, and they all have to kind of look like they belong together, so similar sizes. So I'm going to have the point to this one somewhere around here. So up from here and over maybe about 3 or 4 inches from the edge of your canvas, so somewhere about there. And again, it needs to come out of the center of the flower. So the flower grows from right here. So everything has to grow from out there. So this one's going to kind of get lost. Let me just move that a little bit. Get lost within here a little bit. So I'm gonna say this one starts maybe somewhere in through here, and I'm gonna just bring it up something like this, and then over. This is my goal. I want to get to right here. So maybe something like this. And I love having movement in my petals, so you can see how I'm almost wiggling them as I go. I think this one I'm going to have the edge of it coming over here, maybe kind of a similar movement to the other side. You can see I'm kind of going on the slower side just to make sure I've got the movement that I want. And again, you can certainly adjust it once you've got them on there, and as we go through the painting process, you may find yourself wanting to manipulate the shapes a little bit, but again, I'm going to leave myself a little bit of space just so I can understand which petal is which. The next one I think I'm going to have let's see, where do I want the next one to go? Maybe a little bit up in through this vicinity, maybe almost to the I don't know, somewhere over here we're gonna go. So maybe right about there. And then this one, again, it has to grow from the center, you know, come out from here. So I'm gonna just kind of make myself a little bit of an area in through here, bring it up and then down. And maybe this is gonna have a little bit of a rippled edge. All right, maybe I'll bring it to here. I like how they just kind of end up growing as the paint brush decides to move. So again, something like this. And it's a flower, so all the petals don't have to be exactly the same. They don't, because they might be moving different. They might have grown, you know, they might be bent different. A lot of these type of lilies that I see, depending on the age of the blossom, some of these edges can really be curly along the tips of them. So if yours end up a little bit curlier and wigglier, great, just let it happen. And then this one, I think I'm gonna have these top two, they're gonna be bent over a little bit. So I think I'm gonna have this one maybe come up to here and here, and this one's gonna have maybe a little bit of a wiggle up at the top just to show that it's being curled over, and then we'll have this one come down in through here. And again, it's got to come into the center, so something like this. That's a little too boxy up in that corner. And I just keep reloading my brush with that warm gray that we've got. So something like this. And again, here this is my nucleus, so that's where all my petals are coming from. So just keep that in mind as you are painting these petals on, that they all have to come out of that one central area. And then I have one more to do. And I think this one I'm going to have, again, kind of curled over up in through that vicinity. So maybe I'll have one corner here and maybe one corner here. And then I'm going to ripple that edge, so when I go to do my highlights and my shadows, it'll give it the illusion that it's kind of bumped out over the edge there, or it's bending over the edge. And then I've got this coming down in through here. So these look pretty size appropriate, I think. So as you're kind of tidying up this step, just make sure that, you know, they look like they belong on the same flower. If one looks a little bit too large or too small, you might want to adjust it accordingly. And then we are going to be using, let's see, what are we going to use for the next step? Let's use our small brush for the next step. So once you've got this first layer of your petals on here, you can put the medium brush away in your water cup or wherever you'd like, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are doing the shadow for our stems, our stem, we only have one stem, our stem and our leaves. I'm going to use my small brush, and the colors that I'm using are black, brown, and green. And how I'm going to do this is, my thought process is the shadow is going to be on the underside of my stem and my leaves. And then for this one that doesn't have an underside, I'm going to have a shadow maybe a little bit on the left and almost maybe in the center of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of black and brown on my brush. Oh, and I'm going to put a little shadow underneath this part too. So I've got black and brown on my brush. I'm going to, in essence, kind of outline this underside of the stem with black and brown. And this is also going to, we're going to kind of put the knuckle, I'm sure proper terminology, into place with just a little bit of brown and black. And then if you need to, you pick up the green and then just get it to blend in with the rest of that particular part of the stem. So black and brown where you want the shadow, and then you use a little bit of green to get it to blend into the neighboring area. And you can be as dramatic or as subtle with your shadow as you want. I think sometimes, especially when you're looking for more of a realistic look to it, the higher contrast in your shadows and the highlights makes it look a little bit more realistic. So don't be shy when it comes to adding these shadows. I'm actually making this one just a little bit darker, and you can always continue to adjust them as you see fit. And when it comes to nature, nothing's perfect. So if one shadow has some ripply marks on it and the other one is smooth, it's okay. That just means that maybe there's a bump or something within your within that leaf or the stem or whatnot. So I'm just adding a little bit of my black and brown underneath this one, maybe a touch more black. Let's go bold. So a little bit in through there, gonna add a little bit in through here. And you know, I'm consciously kind of thinking of where my leaves are and where the top of them are and the bottom of them, and that's what's dictating where I'm putting these colors. So I just added a little bit of green and brown just to get this to blend in just a little bit. And when we go to do the highlight on the particular leaf or stem, that's also going to help add to the illusion. So I just have a dirty brush with a little bit of black and green and brown. So I just adding that bit of darkness down the back. And really I'm adding my shadow, and then I'm trying to get it to look natural with the neighboring colors next to it. So I'm again, black and brown are what I'm starting with. Maybe this one comes down here. Just a little bit of a shadow there. Black and brown. Maybe this one has a little bit over here because maybe it's being shadowed by the stem. I think I'm going to put a little bit more black down here just to make sure it definitely reads as a shadow. That works for me. And then maybe a little bit more back here on the back side of this particular stem, leaving a little bit of a, I don't know, in the knuckly area. Gosh, wish I knew what the right name of that was. I think I might put a little shadow on this leaf over here too. So I'm just using the remnants of the black and the brown over there, from over there, maybe a little bit more. So maybe this leaf is kind of turned a bit over here. And then we are going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you have your shadows on your leaves and your stem, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to do for the next step is I am adding the shadow on my, well, I don't know what to call this, so I'm going to call it the bell area. So it's the part where the flower starts. I know that there's going to be lots of flower people who are going to know what that is. But how I'm going to do this, I'm going to be using my small brush, and I'm going to be using black, brown, and my original gray color that I created. So I'm putting a little bit of black and brown on my brush, and I'm in essence going to underline the bottom side of this area with my brown and my black. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up this left-hand side underneath this petal a little bit and get this color to blend in with this main area. So I've got the wet paint on there. If I feel like my brush is a little overloaded, just wipe it off on your paper towel and you pick up some of that original gray and you can get it to blend in with the main area. So black and brown to start, then you pick up a little bit of your original gray while they're still wet. You just kind of blend them in together. And then if it's not blending fully with your main area, just keep picking up that original gray and keep going in that direction to the right, and you'll eventually get it to blend in nicely with that original color. And then I'm going to put a touch of shadow underneath these petals as well. So just putting a little bit more black and brown on my brush, and I'm going to, in essence, kind of underline that little petal there and put a little bit down in through here. Now, I don't necessarily want this shadow to travel as far as that one, as far as this one down here. So I'm actually washing my brush and wiping it on my paper towel. I'm going to pick up some of that original gray and I'm going to blend it right here. I don't necessarily want it to travel too far. So, and if yours ends up traveling a little bit farther than you want, just let it dry, and then you can really manipulate it as you can put additional layers on it if you want to, or as the painting process gets further on down the line. And then we're going to use this same, yeah, that looks good. We're going to use the same brush for the next step. So once you've got your shadow on your bell kind of area, you can wash and dry this small or medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so I think I might have confused myself and probably you at the same time. We're using our medium brush for the next step. I think I said small and medium, so I don't know. But I want to use the medium round brush for this next step that we're going on to. What we're going to be doing is we're putting the shadow inside the center of the flower. So similar to what we did in this bell area, I'm going to be using my medium brush. I'm going to be using black, brown, and my original gray. And what I really just want to tell this story is that this area in through here is the darkest, and it's the area that is coming, you know, out from this central area. So I'm going to put a little bit of black and brown on my brush. When I do this, I'm really concentrating on it coming out in through here. And then I will also be pulling a little bit of it up my petals. So if you want, you can certainly start telling the story of which petal is in front of which. So I know that this one is in front of this one, so I might put a little bit darker area right behind it. So I'm going to first start by making sure that I have my darkest area exactly where I want it, which is directly up from here. So I've got my nice black and brown on my brush, and I'm outlining kind of this petal in through here, or the top of it, something like that. And then I'm going to start just gently pulling it up into these petals. And if you feel like you have too much paint on your brush, then what you'll want to do is you can wipe it on your paper towel. I don't necessarily recommend picking up water or anything like that. Just wipe it on your paper towel and then pick up a little bit of brown and your original gray, and that's going to help you to get this to blend in with the center and with those petals. So I'm just gently pulling it up, and if you feel like you go too dark, you can certainly adjust it accordingly. Don't panic, just let happen. That darkness in the middle is really what's going to make it pop and make it look nice and realistic. So now that I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with the quantity of paint that's on my brush, which is not much at all, I'm almost just kind of rubbing it up into those particular petals. So something like this. I'm going to add just a touch more so I can make sure that it's nice and deep dark in through there. Pick up a little bit of my original gray. And I know that my original gray is lighter when it's wet than it is when it dries. So I know when I start to touch it onto this that's dry, it's going to look different, but I know that it's going to dry the same. So if you're not familiar with how that works, don't be alarmed, and just making sure that it's really nice and dark in that center area, and that this shadowy area talks to, or looks like it belongs to, the area next to it. So you don't really want firm shadow lines that don't really naturally connect to the thing that's next to them. So I'm right now putting a little bit deeper shadow in through here. So this one looks like it's maybe set back just a little bit. And you can certainly just feel free to have fun playing with the intensity of this shadow. That's looking pretty to me. I'm picking up a little bit more of my original gray just to make sure, again, that this works well together and that everything looks like it belongs and is in order, and that's looking pretty good to me. So I think that's gonna call it. I don't need one on this one because this one is leaning over in this direction. So that looks good to me. I am going to be using my small brush for the next step, and I really mean small brush, so you can get that out and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we are finishing our stem and our leaves by putting the highlights on them and any little modifications that you want as well. So I'm gonna be using my small brush. The colors that I'm gonna be using are white, yellow, green, and I'm also gonna use a little bit of red. And if I need to, I can go into the brown and the black as well. So almost every color on my palette. So how I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna first just start by making myself what I'm gonna call a orangey, rusty kind of color. So I'm gonna use a little bit of yellow, a touch of red, and a touch of brown. And I'm gonna be using this as a nice, almost a more natural reddish kind of tone at the tips of these leaves, because when I was looking at them in my flower research, it seemed like a lot of them had almost brownish orangey tips to the leaves, so that's what I'm gonna do. So I've made myself this little orange kind of mixture, and then what I'm gonna do with it, I'm gonna pick it up with a tiny bit of white and a tiny bit of yellow. So I've got all three of those a little bit on my brush at the same time. And I'm gonna add this really bright little bit of a highlight on the tips of them. And you can make this as intense or as subtle as you want. It's totally up to you. I'm gonna do that for this little tip over here as well. And it's really just a subtle, almost adds a little bit more of, again, that natural color to it. So you can do it on the tips. I'm also going to do it a little bit in this area, in this knuckly kind of area. So something in through here, and then just pull it up into that particular leaf a little bit. I am also going to put some at the base of my bell area up in through here. And again, you can see by just adding this little hint of it, it really just brings it into a nice natural type of color profile. So now I'm going to pick up a little bit of, I don't wash my brush, yellow and white, and this is going to start telling the story of where all of my sunshine is kissing my beautiful leaves in through here. So it can really be super intense if you want. You can have it on either edge of that leaf. That's going to make the leaf look like it's almost in a cup type formation. So have fun with where you put this particular highlight area. You want to kind of make it look natural, so you don't want it too sporadic, but I'm thinking my light source is pretty high up in the sky, so maybe some areas of my leaves are being shadowed by the petals of the flower or by a cloud in the sky, but I'm really trying to put some beautiful summertime atmospheric dimension onto my leaves by adding all of this sunshine, especially at the top. So yellow and white. I do pick up a little bit of green every now and again just to make sure that I don't turn it too out of the correct color palette. I think I'm going to add a touch of yellow and white down this little edge in through here, so you can really just kiss these little tiny spots along the edges, just to make it look like Mother Nature is making this plant come to life, this flower come to life with all the sunshine. I don't know what the proper vitamin C, does that come from? Vitamin D? I don't know, whatever vitamin comes from the sun is definitely helping to make this beautiful plant grow. So really, make sure that you can see that sunshine all on this leaf. And then you can keep tweaking it as much as you want to. But I'm going to be switching brushes to the medium brush for the next step. So once you have all of your beautiful highlights on your leaves, you can put this small brush away in your water cup, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're adding the color inside the center of the flower. So these flowers come in a variety of different shades. Some of them can have a greenish hue, some of them can have a yellow hue, and I'm sure there's other colors too, but those were the two main colors that I saw. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be using my medium brush, and I'm using a tiny bit of my yellow paint. And you could, in this step, if your canvas is nice and dry, you could certainly water down your paint a little bit, but yellow is going to tend to be really nice and see-through, or translucent, so you're going to be able to see the colors underneath it. And I don't want it all to be 100% saturated with this color. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit on in through here, and then just almost rub it in the direction of where I feel that flower petal is going. And again, you could have yours more intense. If you wanted, you could add a little bit of white to it to give different tones, but the white is gonna make it less see-through. So you might have a little bit harder of a time keeping that shadowing in through there, but you could, I guess, add a little white before you started putting it on the canvas itself. And that really is all I'm going to be doing for adding my color on the inside of the flower. I'm going to be using my small brush for the next step. So once you've done that, you can get your small brush ready and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're doing the first layer on our ladybug. So I'm gonna be using my small brush, and I'm gonna be using red, brown, and black. And how I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna do my shell with red and brown on my brush at the same time. And the reason why I'm using brown is because I want my shell to have a kind of a shiny, shimmery look to it. And by using the brown with the red first, it's gonna give it a nice, almost a deeper, darker red. So when I do the second layer on it, I'll use a vibrant red, which will give it kind of like a shimmery type look. So how I'm going to do this, I'm going to have mine kind of crawling up my stem in through this area. I'm going to have my body, or my shell part, is going to be just a little bit away from this leaf here, and I'm going to keep it about 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch away from my stem itself. And then I'm going to just kind of make myself a little bit of a diagonal line that is similar to my stem itself, and then I'm just going to make myself the top of an oval for the top part of the shell. And then I'm going to just color it in with my red and brown. There's no fancy brush stroke here. You just want to get a layer of paint on there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel, and I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of black. This is going to be for the head part. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to start a little bit up on the left side, and I'm going to bring this down in through this area like this, and then it comes down, almost touches my stem, and then I just bring it back up like that. I'm going to color that in with black paint, and then I'm going to underline the bottom part of the shell with black paint. And if you can, if you have it a little bit thicker where it meets the head and a little bit thinner where it meets the back side of the ladybug, that will make it look a little bit more natural. And fun fact, I don't think ladybugs are actually bugs. I think they're beetles. So they come in different colors too. We're doing the traditional looking little ladybug here. So here we go. I am just kind of making a slender line, and it doesn't even have to go all the way to the back of the shell. And that's all I'm going to do for the first step on my ladybug. So once you have this on here, let's see, we are going to be using the medium brush for the next step. So you can put your small brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are finishing the main petals in through here. I'm going to be using my medium brush, and my dominant color is going to be white, but I will also be tapping into my original gray. And if I need to, I can certainly go into my brown or my black if I want to. This, depending on the thickness of your paint, may be a multi-layer type step. If your paint is thicker, you might be able to get it on in one coat. If your paint is thinner, like mine is, I use a student grade paint, which is really nice and thin, that allows me to do layers. You may end up doing multiple layers. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to be using white as my highlight color, but it's also going to be telling the viewer where each petal bends. So this one, for instance, the brightest part is going to be right in through here, because that's going to be the part that's closest to the light source. Wherever that may be, it's going to be high up in the sky, I'm assuming. So, and it's the part of the petal that bumps out the most. So this area is going to be the lightest. In through this petal here, my petal's kind of tipping over, so this entire top area can be bright. Or if I want my petal to look like it dips in the middle, I can have the edges lighter. So same thing with this one over here. I probably will have, because this one's tipped over too, I'll have the top pretty light, but if I want it to look like there's a dip in the middle, I'll have it a little bit darker. This one I'll probably have light here, darker here, maybe I'll have a little edge brighter over here. So you'll see how I go through this. It's pretty systematic in my head how I do it, but you might end up finding a little bit different of a process. So here I go. I just loaded my brush with white paint, and I'm going to put my lightest or my heaviest white paint where I want it the brightest. So for this particular petal, I'm going to have it in through here. And if you are not comfortable with blending your paint yet, if you're kind of new to this, I do recommend maybe less is more on a step like this. Less paint on your brush gives you more control over how you can apply it. So for me, I'm pretty comfortable with quantity of paint and stuff, so I did use quite a bit, but right now I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel, because I want this paint to blend into these darker areas. So I'm just kind of pulling the wet edges down in through here, and I will be picking up a little bit of my original gray in a minute, but I just want to kind of get my highlight area where I want it to be first. So there's my highlight area. I'm picking up a little bit of my original gray to get these to really work together. These particular petals also have I don't know if it's called a seam or a vein or something down the middle of them, down the center of them. So if you end up having them almost look kind of stripy, that works, because this particular flower has that type of look to it. And again, I'm just kind of moving and manipulating my lightest area as it's drying, just to give myself this dimensional look to it. And again, you might need multiple layers. You might get it all on one shot, but you can really see how this is taking on some nice dimensional shape as this paint is getting spread around, and it's starting to, I'm giving it these directional kind of brush strokes, and I'm hardly at times touching my canvas at all. So that way I can just lightly manipulate the paint. So that one's pretty good for now. I'm going to just kind of keep moving on to the next ones, and I might come back to this one before I am finished with this step to do any little tweaks that I might need to. So again, I've got kind of a good amount of white paint on my brush to tell myself where I want the brightest area of that particular petal to go. So for me, I know that it's kind of tipping over the edge, so I've got my brightest white in through there. And then I can certainly load more paint, more white paint on my brush if I want to, but I want this to kind of look like it's dipping in through here. So I'm actually going to put a little bit of white and my original gray. So that way it's kind of a tonal range in between my bright stuff and my dark stuff. So you can certainly play with that as well. And then I'm just going to kind of pull a couple of these little streaks into the middle, and then just make sure that it all blends as much as I want it to blend. And again, I'm pretty happy with this one at the moment. I might come back to it on a second pass, but I'm gonna go ahead and start the next one with some white paint on my brush. I think I want that edge to be pretty bright, but I think I also want in through here to have a pretty bright area to it. So just got some white paint on there, and you can have little parts of the petal that dip in that might not be as bright as your brightest part that you want. So again, the intensity of these highlights really helps to give your petal shape. It helps to tell the viewer where it bends, where the light source is. I think I'm going to pick up some of my original gray just to get these to blend in with one another. So you can see as soon as I pick up that original gray, I don't wash my brush very often. I'm a very lazy brush washer, for those of you who have watched me before. I like all of my colors to talk together, and sometimes just not washing my brush really helps to do that. So again, I'm pretty happy with this right here. I think I might just add a little bit more so the paint is a little smoother looking, and even just adding a little curve in your brush stroke as you're doing this will also help to tell the viewer, maybe this is bumping out a little bit. So any little bit of information that you can have your paint convey, that's going to help to bring this into a more realistic look as opposed to a two-dimensional look. But two-dimensional isn't a bad thing to have when we're painting. That can be quite fun too. So this one here, again, I'm going to just start with some white paint on my brush. I really want my lightest area to be in through here. So this is going to be the part where my petal bumps out the most, and I think this one I'm going to have a little edge to my petal over here that's going to almost look like this edge is the closest to us, and maybe it's got a little ripple over there, and getting the colors to blend with each other. That's going to make it look a lot more natural too. So that's where you see I kind of put that bright spot where I want it, and then I will blend it out into the neighboring areas. And then in through this edge here, maybe I'll pick up a little bit of my original gray without washing my brush. So it's going to be my gray plus my white, and all the while I am thinking of how this particular petal is bending. So that's where my brush stroke is going to go to. And I definitely want to make sure that it all talks to that center area as well. I don't want anything to feel like it's disconnected. So that's where, if you need to, you can go back into your original colors just to make sure that you've got whatever intensity that you want in that center. So again, gonna go on to my next one. I think this one, my brightest area, I think I want this one in through here, maybe wherever I have this little bump up area, that to me is telling me it should be pretty bright in through there. So maybe this is gonna have a couple of bright areas. Maybe this is gonna be one of our focal leaves, nice and close to us, and we're gonna feel like it's got tons of movement to it. And maybe this one's in front of that one, so I can put a little bit lighter of an area there. Picking up my original gray to make sure that I've got a nice blended area in through here, and because I'm using more of the gray down here, it'll make it look almost like it's dipped in a little bit. But you want to make sure that you have a nice good coverage, that you don't see any of your background underneath your paint by the time this step is done. So again, you might find that you have to go back and do a second layer on it depending on what type of paint that you're using, but just know that you want to have good coverage. You can make these petals seem really dimensional just by adding those light spots and the dark spots and making those paint strokes in the direction that the leaf or the petal is moving or going to. So I'm going to move on to this one. I think my light area is going to be in through here. So we're going to add a bunch of white paint in through there and just kind of move it around, make that my brightest area. I do want this area to be bright too, but I want it to maybe dip in a little bit in through here. So I'm going to add a bunch of white up in through here as well. And then maybe I'll put a little bit of my original gray in through here just so they can talk to each other, but they still have a little bit of that tonal change to show that it dips in a little bit. And again, you know, if you haven't done this type of process before, it might take a couple of layers to get used to, but the main thing is you want it really the brightest where it's closest to the viewer and where the sunshine is hitting it the most. So I'm just kind of finishing up this last little petal here. And I want this to, you know, look like it's bumping out over here, and then maybe we see a little bit of a crease or a bump out down here. And I might quickly go and do a second layer on, you know, do a second pass, but that's going to be, you know, kind of a personal decision on your part. If you get through this first pass and you're like, oh, they really look, they look great, I don't feel like I need to do a second pass, then you're good. But just kind of think of that first layer that we did, or the first step or two that we did on the painting where we did the background. And when we put that second layer on it, it just elevated the look of it so much more. So if you feel like you're good, by all means stop. But if you do want it to kind of be brought into an even, you know, further realistic realm, you might be, you know, it might behoove you to do a second layer on it. Even here, like I can see that that's kind of chunky looking in through here, so I would definitely come back and do a second pass on this one. And I'm probably just going to do a quick second pass on all of them, because that's the way that I roll. So I just do my white again, and then pick up a little bit of my original gray just to make sure it looks nice and complete. And I've got, you know, it's saying everything that I want it to say. So again, have fun with this. I'm going to just kind of keep tweaking this here and making sure I've got all of my edges and my bright spots to pop the way that I want them to. And then let's see, what are we going to do for the next step? Oh, we're going to be doing a fun, cute little step. We're going to use our small brush for the next step. So once you've got your beautiful petals all nice and finished in through here, and you can see I'm just kind of plugging away, doing the same thing on each one, this with a second pass to it. Once you've got this done, you can put your medium brush away in your water cup. Yeah, these ones are pretty good. And get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're adding our highlight on this little bell area. So I'm gonna use my small brush. I'm gonna be using white and yellow and probably a little bit of brown and maybe my original gray. So I'm gonna start with a touch of white on my brush, and I'm gonna have my highlight over in this area because I want it to look three-dimensional, and this is gonna be the area that's gonna pop out the most. So I'm going to add a little bit over here on the right hand side, maybe bring this all the way up into here, like the sun is shining in there somewhere. I'm gonna pick up just a teeny bit of yellow with my original gray. I did not wash my brush, and I'm gonna get this to blend in a little bit. And you can have this as intense as you want or as subtle as you want, but definitely you want to have this area a little bit darker so it gives it that three-dimensional aspect to it, and this area to be lighter. And then I think I need a little bit of black on my brush just to make sure that I'm blending it in with that shadowy area. So I felt like I brought it a little bit too bright, so I had to go back into my original colors. So I'm just making sure that I've got this nice and blended. And then we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your beautiful highlight on your bell area, you can wash and dry the small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the stems to these colorful things that come out the center. I think they're called stamens, but I'm probably wrong. I'm sure somebody will check me on that one, but the little long things that are coming out the center. So the colors I'm going to be using are brown and white. I'm going to use my small brush, and I'm first going to do them with brown. They don't need to come straight out in, you know, a very straight line. They can have a little bit of a bend, but they have to be coming out of the bell. So when I do this, you know, I can have, you know, maybe one coming up like that. I'm doing them in brown first, and then what I'll do is I'm going to do a little bit of a highlight or a second kind of color to them with white. And they, oops. It's nice when the instructor says, oops, right? You can have as many as you want. I'm just going to have kind of an assortment. They can overlap one another. Think of them, you know, like stems or branches on a tree. They don't have to be perfect. But again, you want them to make sure that they read as they're coming out of here and not like out of here. So just be conscious of where you're kind of bringing them out from that center area. I know for me, it's been a little bit tricky when doing this painting. I want to have them come out over here, and that's not where they should be coming out of. So I'm going to do something like that. I think that's as many as I'm going to do now. I'm not washing my brush. I'm just picking up a touch of white, and I'm going to do a little bit of a highlight on that stem part of these. So something like this. And this is just helping it to stand out. I think these are actually mostly a really light color if you look at the actual flower itself. So the brown is really just acting as kind of our accent or our shadow type color. And then we're going to be, once we've got this on here, we will be using our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got this nice areas for these fun, colorful stem little pollen pieces out the center, you can put the small brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. Okay, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're using our medium brush. We're going to put the colored part, or the first layer of the colored part, on those stems that you just did. So the colored part on the pollen things, the pollen stamen things. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use that rusty color that we made earlier. If you don't have any left, you can certainly just kind of blend it back together. So it was red, yellow, and brown, some kind of combination thereof. And I'm going to use quite a bit of it. And these almost look like little lady slipper type shapes to me, almost like little beans. So I'm going to just take this color and do it in different directions, maybe about an inch to an inch and a half long. The stem of them is not at the end, it's kind of in the middle of it, so they can go in different directions. They can be, you know, standing up, they can go to the side, they can have a little bit of curve to them. And again, I think it kind of depends on what type of variety of lily it is, but they do come in different colors. Some of them are almost like a maroon type color. Some of them are purpley. These particular ones are very orangey kind of yellow color. So, you know, if you want to incorporate a different color into yours, feel free to do so. And I think that looks pretty good. So we're going to be using our small brush. Oh, if you don't get perfect coverage, don't worry, we have another layer to go. But we're going to be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got this colored part on, you can put your medium brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're finishing our ladybug. I'm gonna use my small brush. The colors that I'm using are red, yellow, white, and black. Yeah, I think that's all the colors I'm gonna use. So I'm gonna start with red and yellow on my brush, and I'm doing my second coat for my actual shell part of the ladybug. And because we have that dark color underneath, you might not be able to detect this from the video, but when you do it on your own, you'll see how that dark layer underneath really helps to make this almost three-dimensional, because you can get those pops of darkness under there, and it looks really pretty. So now that I've got my layer of red on there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight on the edge of the shell, the bottom edge. So I'm going to put, I didn't wash my brush, I'm just going to put a little bit of yellow and white on my brush. And I'm going to come down to this bottom little edge. Wiped my brush off on my paper towel, picked up a little bit more yellow because it was too white for me, and just kind of pull this towards the back end. It doesn't have to be a solid line. Just think of it as maybe the edge of the shell is being, you know, kissed by the sun. That's how, you know, the best way that I can put it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tiny bit of a highlight on the top edge of that shell. So just a little bit of yellow, and if you need to, a little white, but just a teeny tiny bit of a highlight up in through here. Again, that's going to add the illusion of it being round. And I'm not using a lot of paint because I really want it to kind of dry quick. But if yours doesn't dry quick enough for you, that's okay. You can, you know, you can wait. But I want to do my black marks in a minute, so I'm not using a ton of paint. I'm going to wash and dry my little brush, and I'm going to be adding my tiny little legs and antennas. So teeny tiny bit of black paint. If you have to, you can water down your black paint a little bit to make it like an ink consistency. And you can also take your brush and spin it on the side of your palette. You just really want to make sure that you have a nice pointy brush to do this. And from my ladybug research, I think that they have 6 legs and 2 antennas. So how I'm going to do this is I'm just going to kind of put maybe just one on this side of the stem, the flower stem, and then one on the other. So there's one set, here's another set, and then maybe this set goes forward like this, one there and one there, and then the little antenna come out, I think the bottom of the face somewhere in here. So 1, 2, and I think you can put a little tiny ball on the end of the antennas, and that would work. And then while I have the black on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of polka dots on my little ladybug. The black will overpower any color that it's underneath except for white. So if you have a lot of white, it might turn a bit gray. So that's why if it's not dry the shell, you can just wait a minute. And if it is a little wet, maybe that top ends up looking a little bit lighter, which will really look great. It'll make it have more of a three-dimensional look to it. And have as many spots as you want. All ladybugs come with a different number of spots. And then I'm gonna wash and dry my brush and put a little bit of white on my brush. This is gonna add, whenever I'm doing bugs or beetles, it always resembles like armor to me. So we're gonna put the ladybug's armor on right now. So they've got some kind of little, let me just make sure my brush is pointy enough here. That's good. This little kind of white area up at the top and through here. There's maybe a little stripe down there, maybe a little bit on the head. And you know, I don't know the exact perfect markings, but you could certainly have fun with however you want to put your armor on your ladybug. And then I'm going to put a tiny little shadow underneath it. So I'm going to wash and dry that small brush and put a touch of black on my brush. And if you're scared of the black, just make sure that you're wiping it off on your paper towel. I just really want there to look like there's a little bit of a shadow underneath it. You might already, your stem might already be dark under there, but if it's not, you can add a touch of a shadow and that'll make it look a little bit more realistic. And then let's see, what are we going to do next? We are going to be switching back to our medium brush. So once you've got your ladybug all nice and perfectly placed here and you've got a little bit of a shadow underneath it, you can wash and dry your medium brush and get ready for the next step. Okie doke. So what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing the colored part of these things that come out the center of the flower, the stemmy things. So I'm going to be using my medium brush and I'm going to be using yellow is going to be my dominant color and a little bit of white as well. And I'm really just going to be adding polka dots, but I don't want to take away from all the dark color. That's in essence there to add dimension and to bring this color into a more realistic realm. So I'm just going to take my yellow and white and add a little bit in through there. And I'm using pretty heavy, thick paint right now, and I'm not blending it in. I just am adding these textural kind of polka dots, and the white definitely is going to help to make it look more three-dimensional. So feel free to just have fun with this particular step, get them to pop right out of the canvas, which I feel like mine are, which makes me so happy when that happens. So now that I've got this done, almost, I've got two more little ones to go, and then we have one tiny little step left to go. So once you've got these colored pieces all nice and painted in here, you can take out your small brush, yeah, that looks great, and get ready for the next step. All right, so this last step here is intended to make your petals just really pop out of your canvas. It's a really subtle step. I'm going to be using my small brush, and what I'm going to be doing is, in essence, kind of adding a teeny tiny bit of a shadow underneath or around some of these petals, and that's going to make it pop right out of the canvas. So it might not even be something that most people can detect by looking at it, but once you do it, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to add a touch of brown and a little bit of black. And again, with my small brush, if you feel that that's too scary, you can add a touch of water to it, and that's going to help you to add it at your own pace, in a slow type fashion. So if you get nervous because it's black, that will help. So I'm just kind of going to go along the edge of some of my petals. It doesn't even have to be along the entire edge. You can do brown, you can do black. If you want something to pop out, just put a teeny tiny little bit of this darker color right along the edge. I suppose you could even use, if you have a lot of purple in your background, you could use, you know, your purple, you could use your blue if you know, any color that is a little bit darker than that background is going to help make these stand right out of the canvas. So I'm not going to do it too intense on them. And if you feel like you've gone too far, you can certainly come back, make your petal grow a little bit with a little bit wider of an edge. But this could also help to, in between your leaf or your petals, to make them look like they're separated a little bit if you need them to be. I think I want to put a little bit around this edge in through here, get this one to pop out just a little bit more. And again, if you feel like you've gone too far, you can certainly come back with a little bit of white, but I like the effect that this gives. It's always something that is just a very subtle thing that helps to add that little punch or that little added intensity to it. And that's gonna do it on that step for me. And we have one final little step that's gonna be with that small brush. So once you've got these little outlines on and your petals are popping right off your canvas, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of any painting, which is to sign it. So I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right. I think I'm gonna sign this one in the bottom left. I'm using my small brush. I am using black paint. I usually do my initials, but you could certainly do your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you'd like. It's your painting, your identifying mark. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a really lovely lily, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.